Good evening and welcome to the Job Search Solution, the radio program where we talk about looking for a job, jobs, changing careers, hiring. And as always, we begin with a prayer. Dear God, grant us thy peace and thy mercy, thy will be done. And I had a caller that listened to our radio program on 100.7 FM, and he was looking for a job. And he was complaining about the fact that he sees all of these jobs that he knows he could do if he got the chance to interview for him and got hired for him. And I probably hear this at least 4 or 5 times a week. Tony, just get me in front of him. I know I can do that job. And I look at these job postings and I know that I can do that job. There's just no doubt about that I can do it. Well, I'd be willing to venture that 60% of the candidates I work with could probably do 60% of the jobs that I represent if they got the chance to do it. What people have to understand, and here's where the problem comes, is getting the chance to do it. The ability to get a job and the ability to do the job are two different things. And just because you have the ability to do a job and you know you can do it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get hired to do the job. And here's the reason. If an organization is going to invest 100 or 150 or $200,000, even $75,000, whatever, in a person in order to do a job, they want to get a person that they can either document has done the job before or someone who's absolutely a least risk. Now you sit there and if you're a candidate, you're looking at a job posting or you're reading about a job or you even hear about a job, you think, I'm not a risk. I'm not a risk. I'm a good worker and I can learn. I learned in college or I learned in a job before. I learned the jobs that I've worked with before. I could certainly learn that. There's just no doubt about that. Now, I'm not talking about accountant becoming a salesperson or a salesperson becoming an engineer or an engineer becoming something else. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about realistically within the discipline you're in. But if you were competing with, on average, 150 other resumes of people that probably have some kind of documentable track record in what a company is doing. So even though you might be able to do a much better job than any of those people that you're competing with, a company is going to run the least risk they can and try to hire somebody that has a documentable background in what they do. And why wouldn't they? If you were in their shoes, what are you going to turn to your boss and say, well, I hired this person just because I felt like they could do the job. I know they don't have any background in what we do here or background in the position, but man, I just got this gut feeling that they could do the job. And of course, they told me they could do the job. It has nothing to do with whether or not you think you can do the job or even whether you can do it or whether you can't. It has to do with your ability to prove that you have the skills they need in order to do the job. And you may not even get a chance to do that because if they're looking at a resume or even if they're screening you on the phone, what they're going to ask you is, what kind of documentable experience do you have in what we do? And we're going to try to find as close as we can to the kind of experience that we want in what we do, because we want to take the least risk. The last thing any employer needs is to hire somebody, have them not work out, and then have their CEO or their board member or their boss say to them, why didn't you hire somebody with some experience in what we do? At least it's documentable. If you turn to that person and that boss and say, well, I just felt like they could do the job and they told me they could, and there was no doubt that they could because they convinced me that they could. and they have alternatives to people with documentable skills in what they do, they're going to look foolish. So, no matter how much you think you can do a job, you got to get the chance to do it. And the most likely way, unless it's your cousin or your brother in law or your uncle or somebody that's a friend of yours, that's a close friend of yours is willing to run the risk of you getting hired and being able to do the job, the probability of you getting hired isn't very great unless you can document some kind of track record in what they do. And so you say, well, I've got a good track record doing this, so therefore I'm probably going to be as good at doing that. Well, you've got to remember what your competition is. If you're old enough to remember Michael Jordan going to play baseball, he wasn't very successful. And the reason he wasn't was one, his the muscle matter that he had to do with basketball, not baseball. And he was competing with baseball players. Now, they may not have been as good an athlete as he was. He was the best athlete in the world at the time, but his muscle memory was oriented towards basketball. And as much as he would try, he was competing against baseball players, and he just didn't get very far. So think about that. I know you can do that job. And when you call me and say, just get me in front of them, Tony, I know I can do it, you're competing with 150 other people that may probably have more experience that relates to what the hiring authority is looking for. All right, stay tuned. This is Tony Bashir with the Job Search Solution.